Welcome back to AVAIYA, Marquita.
Hi, Andy. Thank you so much for having me back. I'm so excited to share with your audience today about relationship trauma and being able to heal from it.
Yeah, I'm so excited that you were open to talking about it. So let's just talk about like what is relationship trauma to get us started.
Yeah, it's a topic I think that's tossed around a lot, but we don't often know like what encompasses relationship trauma. So looking at it from a lens of occurring between intimate partners, and this can include physical, emotional, and spiritual, abuse. So that can look like poor boundaries, attachment issues, people pleasing, narcissism, numbness, hero or rescue syndrome, disassociation, anger, resentment, emotionally being unavailable or closed off, unhealthy communication, infidelity, dishonesty, mistrust, trauma bonding. So it can mean a lot of those different things, but ultimately it's the breakdown in safety in a relationship that can lead to like what we refer to as post-traumatic stress disorder. It can lead to a lot of symptoms stemming from the abuse that occurs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to talk about those symptoms in a second, but first I'm curious, a couple things kind of struck me when you were listing those things out, right? Number one being hero/rescue syndrome. Can you share a little bit more? I have an idea of what that is, right? But what do you see that is?
Yeah, the way I like to describe it, I use a lot of examples is about like being out in a boat, like a lifesaver raft. So you're ultimately constantly saving people and you're feeling this need that you have to save. That's how you see your value and you get your worth from saving and rescuing others. And so it's essentially just like it says, like you're Avengers or that Marvel hero, and you're going in trying to rescue this person emotionally, hold yourself accountable for their own emotional work, for their career work. You make yourself the sole kind of responsibility for their life, which ends up being very unhealthy in any relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm seeing like the visual of yes, the lifeboat, the throwing the little like tube
Right.
out to people, right?
Yeah, that
In our
lifesaver.
superhero outfits. Yes.
Yeah. And you're rescuing them, but all the while you're drowning. And so,
Right.
how can you rescue someone when you're struggling yourself? And ultimately, you set up that dynamic to continue rescuing them so they don't try to problem solve or figure things out. They call you, they run to you because they know you'll rescue them. And then it lacks the accountability and responsibility that they should have for doing the work.
Right. Then they're not learning how to, be self-sufficient in the ways that they need to be and all that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
And the one other thing you mentioned was spiritual abuse. And I'm curious, that's something that doesn't get talked about as much, I think, as other kinds of relationship trauma. What is spiritual abuse?
ultimately it's using any form of like religion to ensure that the abuse continues. So it's almost like they utilize a person's faith to justify their behavior. And so it may mean they're looking at scriptures or readings or beliefs, and taking them out of the whole kind of context of the statement or context of the religious practice, and they're centering to make it fit to a situation to enact abuse and manipulation and power and control over someone. And that can be seen, on an individual level, but also in a community level. And that can be very devastating to a lot of people because it's isolating.
Right. Yeah, God. I was just thinking of, right, like how many children have been abused in such ways over the years in our society, right?
Very disheartening.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing a little bit more about those two types of abuse and the hero rescue syndrome. So, right, relationship trauma can be many different things. What are some of the symptoms you see people suffering from if they are enduring or have endured relationship trauma?
Yeah, usually the person has problems regarding their self-esteem, their self-worth, their ability to trust others, and believe that they are worthy. of healthy relationships. So it gets to the point of them numbing themselves so much so that they don't believe they deserve better. It's almost like we call it a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, oh, this person is mistreating me. There's something that I did to deserve this. There's something, no one deserves to be abused. No one deserves to be traumatized. And so really looking at that from a lens of understanding that with any type of abuse, there's the power and control that goes there. And that's how the manipulation occurs, the isolation occurs, to continue allowing that abuse to take place. And in that abusive, unhealthy, or toxic relationship, then the person that escapes it and survives it often is left with the post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. So anxiety, heightened level of anxiety, disassociation, appetite issues that can mean overeating, undereating, or having disordered eating patterns to where the person can't seem to get a routine regarding their eating habits. Also, sleeping disturbances are a really main symptom, having nightmares, having tremors, having even physical ailments and somatic symptoms associated with enduring that trauma and then being re-traumatized by similar experiences or similar feelings or emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm curious, I mean, it's so fascinating in the last few years, how much we've been, I think, linking as a society, right, PTSD to relationship trauma, and how many people are really seeing it. Wow, this is actually an issue. And in your experience, as a counselor, like, is it the complex PTSD, right? CPTSD that we're talking about, or is it more PTSD in general? Like, how do you see it showing up for people?
Yeah, often with relationships, I think it leans more to the complex because this is a space of safety and a space where we kind of let our guards down, a space that we become comfortable, we become vulnerable. And so when you think about any space that you've been in regarding a relationship, at some point, we learn to trust the other individual. We learn to trust them emotionally, financially, physically, spiritually. Like there are these layers that go along with that. So it becomes very complex in that person leaving that toxic relationship or unhealthy relationship and moving forward in their lives because they have to unravel all of that. It's very unlikely that you can just say like, okay, I'm leaving and I'll begin my life, because you have to unpack and deal with all of those experiences and emotions that you're moving into your new life with.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned trust in there, because that is definitely one of the, like, a huge symptom for people having come out of a narcissistic relationship, or currently living with that one, or moving on from that and trying to trust again. Do you have any suggestions for people on how to learn to trust others again and theirself? Right. Because I think it can be both ways.
Yes, it actually is both ways. And yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because ultimately we think about trusting other people. Like, how will I ever trust another person again? Well, the trust starts with yourself. And we also recognize that trust is a choice. When we think about experiences that we've had, we've met people and automatically, like, our hairs on the back of our neck kind of raised up, and we were like, there's something about this person that I just don't trust them. Or we've seen family or friends interact with someone and we kind of like sit back and we're observant and we're thinking, is something just not right? So we also have to understand, when did I stop trusting myself? At what point did I stop trusting myself? Whether that's in that relationship or in other relationships that are similar to that, because you'll start to recognize some patterns in your life where you learn to not trust that gut instinct based on maybe someone else saying, oh, you're overreacting. That's really not an issue, or you should just calm down. And so really it's you learning to trust yourself again is key in working on how to trust after living with a narcissist, because they've broken down that ability for you to trust. And when we think of it, it's like a seesaw, that person has been on this like seesaw back and forth, back and forth. And so they're trying to regain stability and learn how to trust themselves. And that could mean seeking out professional help, like meeting with a counselor, meeting with a coach, really doing that work to establish your boundaries. And boundaries are beautiful because they create safety for you, but also helps you determine when you feel safe, what helps you feel safe and secure. And it's also beneficial to other people because they have a clear understanding of where you began and where they began, and where you end and where they end. And so it's healthy to work on your communication skills also, so that you become more assertive in it, identifying and acknowledging your boundaries to others and enforcing those boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm curious too, like this comes up a lot when people talk about boundaries, right? Like, how do we like, and I see this in myself, right? Sometimes if we're new to setting boundaries, or we're working on certain types of boundaries with others, we can kind of be angry about it, right? And be like, and not come off as like confident and assertive, but more come off as kind of like maybe pissed off that we have to set a boundary. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like any suggestions for people who are in that boat and to do it, like, I guess in a loving, you can still be assertive, but also loving to yourself and others at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, yes. And that becomes a win-win in a lot of ways, but also understanding that it's up to you to set your boundaries and enforce them.